Hidden among the rolling hills of Santa Barbara County, California, Neverland Ranch was once an enchanting dreamland, where laughter echoed and lights shimmered under the touch of Michael Jackson. But when the stage lights dimmed with his passing in 2009, darkness began to creep in, casting a chilling, suffocating veil over the estate. The once vibrant amusement park rides now stood still like rusting skeletons, and the grand architecture of the main mansion slowly decayed, becoming a massive, sorrowful tomb. By 2010, when the estate was abandoned, a small security team was assigned, reluctant souls stepping into the thin boundary between reality and nightmare. They had no idea they were entering a place where life had been strangled, leaving behind only echoes from the realm of the dead. Daniel, an experienced night watchman, was the first to face the horror. On a freezing night, as thick darkness swallowed the land, he heard a sound that made his blood turn to ice, the distant melody of Billie Jean, drifting through the trees, faint yet sharp, like a whisper from the beyond. Heart-pounding, he followed the sound to the abandoned stage, now covered in dust and decay. But when he arrived, only dead silence greeted him, as if something had just been toying with him before slipping into the shadows. He told himself it was just the wind or an old, forgotten radio. But as he turned to leave, a dry, hollow applause erupted from nowhere, sharp as a blade cutting through the night, sending shivers racing up his spine. The mansion, with its vast, opulent halls, became the heart of the nightmare. The motion sensors inside would blare incessantly, signaling the presence of something unseen moving through the empty corridors. Maria, a female security guard, recounted a night of terror with a trembling voice. Through the ballroom's grand windows she saw dark figures gliding past, fast, like spirits shredded by the cold wind. "I was sure there was an intruder," she whispered, gripping her flashlight as she rushed inside. But the massive room held only darkness and an eerie, watchful silence. No footprints, no breath, nothing. Yet as she stood there, an icy sensation slithered down her spine, as if hundreds of unseen eyes were burrowing into her soul from every corner. Then came the footsteps. Not the random creaks of the wind or rotting wood, but slow, deliberate, conscious steps echoing through the hallway leading to Michael Jackson's old bedroom. Night after night, they rang in the ears of the guards like a deathly rhythm, as if someone, or something, was pacing back and forth, never stopping, never leaving. Some swore they had seen a shadowy figure standing by the bedroom window, motionless like a living statue. But when they stormed in to check, only emptiness and the stale scent of dust greeted them, along with an unshakable feeling of suffocation. The nightmare escalated when Victor, another night guard, faced a sight that nearly shattered his sanity. In the pale moonlight, the Ferris wheel, long dead with no power, no life, began to move. The metal groaned slowly, eerily, like the wailing of an abandoned machine. He stepped closer, his breath quickening, the air around him thick like blood. And then, suddenly, the wheel stopped, abruptly, unnervingly, as if something had just become aware of his presence. Victor felt an unbearable pressure crush his chest, like an unseen hand of darkness tightening around him, suffocating him in raw, primal fear. By 2015, whispers about Neverland Ranch had spread beyond the security team, circulating like a curse. Paranormal investigators risked everything to break in, but most were turned away by the cold, iron gates. Those who dared venture close reported feeling an overwhelming sadness, a heavy sorrow, as if the land itself was screaming in agony. Neverland was no longer a paradise. It had become a prison for lost souls, a place where the darkness didn't just exist, it hunted. Darkness at Neverland Ranch was no longer just a whisper. It had become a living entity, lurking, growling, and slowly consuming those who dared step into its domain. The strange occurrences escalated into an unending nightmare, dragging the security team into a vortex of fear and madness. Maria and Victor, two unfortunate souls trapped in this deadly duty, first heard the voices near the flower garden, once Michael Jackson's favorite retreat. Not the wind, not hallucinations, but real, chilling sounds like the breath of the dead. At first it was just whispers, Maria recalled with a shiver, like the wind rustling through leaves, but then they grew, dozens of voices layered over each other, hissing through the air. Victor, a skeptic who never believed in ghosts, tried to dismiss the fear. But as he approached the marble bench, the one engraved with Jackson's favorite quote, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar, sharp as blades piercing his mind. He shone his flashlight into the bushes, but the light found only darkness. Then all at once the voices stopped, leaving behind a suffocating silence that made his heart skip a beat. Meanwhile Daniel, the veteran guard, faced his own nightmare. One night, while patrolling near the mansion, he noticed the second-floor music room door, locked for years, was now slightly ajar, like an invitation from the abyss. From inside, a piano played, each note cold and sharp as drops of blood hitting the floor. He stepped in, breath unsteady, only to find the room empty, coated in dust, except for the grand piano. Its keys gleamed unnaturally clean, as if someone had just caressed them. Then, before he could turn away, a single key was pressed, sharp, deliberate, like the laughter of an unseen presence. He stumbled back, feeling 1,000 invisible eyes burrowing into his spine, watching his every trembling step. The Hall of Mirrors, once a spectacle for guests, had become Maria's nightmare. The cracked mirrors reflected twisted versions of herself, but one night, when she was forced to check the area, she saw something that wasn't her. "I stood still," she sobbed, "but in the mirror I know it moved. It turned its head, took a step, like it had a mind of its own." She screamed for Victor, but when he arrived, only a formless shadow flickered across the glass. Not theirs, but something ancient, cold, and full of malice. Victor tried to reassure her, but the look in his eyes betrayed the terror clawing at his soul. Time itself began to warp at Neverland, as if reality was being strangled by the hand of darkness. Maria checked the clock at 2 a.m., only to glance back and see it had jumped to 4 a.m. She stood frozen in the middle of the courtyard, unsure how she got there, her hands trembling in the frigid air. Victor too was caught in the curse. One moment he was inside, the next he found himself at the lake, his shoes soaked, his flashlight floating on the black water. He had no memory of how far he had walked, no recollection of what he had done, only the sickening realization that something had pulled him there, like a puppet on invisible strings. The nightmare reached its peak when the guards decided to place cameras in the mansion's grand hallway, hoping to catch their invisible tormentor. But what they saw the next morning turned their blood to ice. At exactly 3:33 a.m., a shadowy figure drifted across the screen, not a living person but a translucent entity gliding with an eerie grace, as if dancing. When it turned just for a fraction of a second, its face became clear. Michael Jackson. But distorted. Hollow. Like an empty shell drained of its soul. "Is that him?" Maria whispered, her fingers trembling over the pause button. Before Victor could answer, the screen flickered to black as if the thing didn't want to be seen for too long. Victor faced his next horror in the private theater, where Jackson once held secret screenings. The heavy doors, always locked, were now slightly ajar, dim light flickering inside like a ghostly flame. Voices echoed, not whispers but clear, animated chatter, like a crowd murmuring in the dark. He stepped in, his voice unsteady as he called out, "Who's there?" The only reply was slow, deliberate clapping, resonating from the direction of the massive screen. The flickering static on the screen twisted into a shadowy figure, blurred but menacing, reaching out as if trying to touch him. He ran, unseen footsteps pounding after him, faster, closer, until he crashed into the security office. At the same time, Maria was dragged into her own nightmare at the abandoned children's amusement park. The once vibrant carousel, now decayed and rusting, suddenly emitted laughter, high-pitched, innocent, yet hollow like a voice from the grave. She called into the darkness, but the only response was the slow, agonizing creak of the carousel turning on its own. Something yanked at her shirt, but when she spun around, there was only empty air, and the laughter now echoing behind her. She didn't remember running back to the office, only that when she arrived, Victor was already there, his face pale as death. "Something's wrong tonight," he growled, and Maria could only nod, heart hammering in her chest. Daniel, the last of their doomed trio, descended into the basement, a place no one dared to go. The heavy metal door creaked open, the darkness inside pulsing like a living thing, swallowing his flashlight's beam. A strange whirring noise broke the silence, like old machinery groggily awakening after decades of sleep. Down there he found forgotten equipment. Dusty recorders, rusting speakers, and a microphone gleaming unnaturally as if freshly polished. Then a voice crackled through the speakers, soft, melodic, but ice-cold. "Can you feel it?" Michael Jackson's voice. Unmistakable. The equipment roared to life, tapes spinning wildly, the microphone trembling as if someone was singing into it. A freezing gust rushed past him, and Daniel felt an invisible hand brush against his shoulder. The basement door slammed shut. Laughter, deep, unnatural, inhuman, rumbled through the darkness. Then silence. Daniel never came back. Outside, Maria and Victor stood frozen, the radio crackling to life with Daniel's voice, twisted and unnatural. "Don't come down here." Then, nothing. Neverland was no longer a place of escape. It was a trap. And those caught inside were being dragged deeper into an abyss with no way out. Neverland Ranch was no longer a place to patrol. It had become a realm of death, where darkness lived and imprisoned souls screamed in silence. Maria and Victor, the two reluctant survivors after Daniel's disappearance, were pulled into the final nightmare, where the boundary between reality and hell disintegrated. The mansion had grown eerily silent, as if holding its breath, waiting for the perfect moment to devour them. In the west hallway, a black wooden door appeared, something that had never existed before. The swirling patterns on its surface slithered like living serpents, and the tarnished golden handle gleamed like an eye watching them. "It wasn't here yesterday," Maria whispered, her voice trembling on the verge of breaking. Victor, despite his fear, stepped closer, but the moment Maria touched the handle, a strange warmth crawled up her arm, like the flesh of something alive. The door swung open, revealing a narrow hallway where portraits lined the walls, their eyes disturbingly lifelike, tracking every step they took. "Do you see me?" A child's voice, clear yet cold as ice, echoed from the end of the corridor. Victor shone his flashlight, and in the flickering beam, a small figure emerged, a child in antique clothing, their face obscured by shadows. The child raised a hand and pointed behind them. When they turned around, the door had vanished, replaced by a cold stone wall. In the theater, the massive screen flickered with static, and Daniel, the one who had disappeared, appeared. He stood motionless, his empty eyes unblinking, his hand stretched toward the screen as if trying to tear through the barrier between worlds. His lips moved, but no sound came out, just before the faint melody of "You Are Not Alone" seeped into the air like a call from the dead. The screen flickered violently, and then the blurry silhouette of Michael Jackson became clearer than ever, a slow smile forming on his lips, yet his eyes were hollow, lifeless. Maria and Victor bolted through the portrait-lined hallway, desperate for an exit. The corridor led them into a circular room, its walls covered in shattered mirrors that reflected hundreds of distorted versions of themselves. In the center stood a spiraling staircase descending into endless darkness. A dim light flickered from below, and whispers swirled around them, rising into a frenzied chorus. They stepped downward, the air growing heavier, the walls pulsing as if the entire mansion had a heartbeat. At the bottom, they entered a vast chamber filled with fragments of the past, broken instruments, tattered costumes, and eerie tape reels labeled Rehearsal 19 and Neverland Session 8. At the center, on a stone pedestal, lay a single white glove, shimmering as if illuminated by an otherworldly glow. Maria, entranced, stepped forward, but just as her fingers nearly touched the glove, a voice thundered through the room, shaking the very foundation. "Leave it!" The glove levitated, radiating a strange, ghostly light, and from the void, a towering figure emerged, its body shimmering like heat waves. The exit vanished, leaving only the icy stone walls behind them. The figure stepped forward, and when it spoke, its voice was not singular but a fusion of thousands of tormented souls. "You should not be here," it intoned, each word slicing into their bones. The air thickened, pressing against their chests as the whispers morphed into agonized wails, as though Neverland itself was crying in despair. The figure grew clearer, Michael Jackson, but not the man they knew. His face was twisted, ravaged by time and darkness, his eyes void like black holes. "I am the keeper of forgotten memories," he murmured, his voice both mournful and menacing. "I was once a star, now a memory, a legend. And they, the ones trapped here, can never leave." Maria shuddered, realizing the horrific truth. The voices, the shadows, the portraits, all were souls bound to Neverland, ensnared by an unbreakable curse. "What about us?" Victor shouted, his voice cracking with fear. The figure tilted its head, its warped smile widening. "Leave now or you will become like us, forgotten, trapped forever." Suddenly the distant sound of a carousel echoed, faint yet sharp, like laughter from a joy long dead. Maria grasped Victor's hand, screaming, "Run!" They sprinted up the staircase, the whispers chasing them like a relentless beast, the corridor twisting, walls bending as if trying to crush them. Invisible footsteps pounded from all directions, yet no one appeared. Finally they saw the front door, slightly ajar, a final invitation to escape. A cold wind howled in, carrying the haunting strains of "You Are Not Alone." They burst outside, never looking back, running until they reached the edge of the estate, where the mansion loomed, its windows dark and watching. Gasping for breath, Victor muttered, "Did Daniel make it out?" Maria shook her head, her heart heavy with sorrow. Deep down, she knew, Daniel had been devoured by Neverland, becoming part of the eternal darkness. As they departed, the wind carried a faint, ghostly melody, a reminder that Neverland was never empty. The souls trapped between reality and legend remained, and they were always watching. The iron gates creaked shut behind them, but the chilling sensation, like the touch of death itself, clung to them forever.